Hello. So yeah, I gave the name of friendless scanning and vicious SIP for this presentation, and I'll be looking at 9 years from the time it started. Let me introduce myself a little bit. I'm the person behind Enable Security. What we do is penetration testing, so security testing in a professional manner. It's not just voice over IP, but voice over IP is one of the specializations, the things that we specialized on. But also we do a lot of network and infrastructure penetration testing and a lot of web applications. Even voice over IP is moving towards web applications with WebRTC and some other things. Originally from Malta. But now I live and run my company here in Berlin. So the next 30 minutes will be all about the reasons why how I came up with these tools, what happened next, so how cybercrime and script kiddies reacted, how the security industry and the telephony / voice over IP / communications industry reacted to the cybercrime. And also I'll be looking at a bit what's next from my perspective, from the perspective of my own tools. So sometime in 2007, I was tasked to test a PBX server by the vendor of the PBX. I did not have a lot of experience with SIP. I had a little bit, but not a lot. I looked, like any other penetration tester, I looked at what tools exist out there. And there was one particular book, Hacking Exposed Voice over IP edition, which was really cool. But there was not a lot of material covering voice over IP / SIP from a security penetration tester point of view. And this book that I just mentioned came out with a lot of proof of concept tools, but they were proof of concept. When you're doing pen testing, you're under stress, and you don't really have a lot of time to play around with proof of concept. You want to show the real issues to your clients, especially if it's a PBX in a lab environment. You need to convince your developers that these problems that you found don't involve just running one tool which sends just one message, one SIP message, but you want to show them the full automated thing. There was no password cracker apart from THC Hydra, which is great and it does a lot of stuff, not just SIP. But this tool did not work for me due to SIP implementation issues from Hydra itself. So during this penetration test, I found some really bad issues. But one of the major issues that really got me thinking was that SIP extensions were being generated numerically, starting from, for example, extension 100, extension 101, and so on. And the passwords were also the same as the extension, which back then seemed to be the standard, the unwritten standard. So it's not an isolated case. And I realized this is a huge problem, right? I mean, you're meant to connect your PBX server to a SIP trunk or maybe some other way and make calls. So if users can guess these passwords and they don't even really have to guess, then they can make free phone calls at the expense of the victim company. So this was very obvious to me. To my client, it was also obvious, but they said, oh, but who's going to do it manually? And I was, frustration kicked in, so I had to build tools. But let me explain a little. I mean, the ease of setup, of course, was the reason. But apart from that, most of these PBX administrators were actually coming from a telephony point of view, from a telephony background, which traditionally was not connected to the internet, not connected to the internal network. And so they were used to doing things like this, whereas I come from the internet world, and we don't do this usually. Especially with hard phones. You don't want to type in complex passwords on hard phones on a keypad. So I understand why they did it this way. I still don't agree. And the third reason was very important to me. The third reason was that no security tools existed back then, which really showed how bad the problem is. So I started writing some code, which eventually got named the wonderful name of Subvicious. The client didn't like my report, but they fixed stuff, so it was effective. I shared this code, since it was not tied to just one client, with my fellow pen testers, and we share this information and so on. And they were also facing the same issues. They were facing issues with asterisk-based PBXs back then. So they were quite happy with these tools, and they were pushing me to release the tools, and I put them public, open source, of course. Once it got, the code became useful enough. And the tools were 3 tools. I'm not going to go into much detail, but basically you've got svcrack, which does an online password cracking attack. And I guess most of you know this from your packet traces, at least. And it works very simply. There's nothing amazing about it. It gets a challenge by the SIP registrar, and it challenges that it sends a challenge response with the computed authentication header. And it does this over and over again in a very short time. So that was the innovation, I think, that it was quite fast. It could be faster, but it was quite fast for that time compared to other tools. SVWAR, which enumerated extensions by brute forcing, as we saw in the previous presentations, and it worked pretty well. And it worked because you could tell from the responses from the PBX SIP registrar if SIP extension existed or not. So if you got a 404, you obviously knew this you cannot register on this SIP extension. And the reason why this worked also was because those guys who were developing tried to follow the SIP RFC, which said, you should return a 404. As VMAP, the last tool, or the first tool, depending on your point of view, it allows you to find SIP devices. It can scan the internet in a short period of time, and it just looks for a SIP response when you send an options message. And that also worked because the SIP RFC kind of wanted people to implement options always, or implement it. So it was published. I made a nice little logo there, mascot, and it got some attention. And lots of people in the security industry, they loved it because it was pretty useful for them. And I made a lot of good friends back then who are still very good friends nowadays. So it had a lot of benefits for the security community, and eventually also the voice over IP community started using these tools. It took a while, but yeah. But let me skip a bit forward, and at some point in time, this was the first one that I got, I think, while looking through my email archives. There might have been others. I started getting these funny emails, and this was the first one. It's nothing. I mean, it's nice to, to get appreciation in caps lock. But I started getting a lot of them. And I went through my email archive and found a few. Some people, they became buddies and they could call me bro and pay me for this. But I never accepted any money, for the record, for these things. And I got a lot of these emails. So you're laughing. They want the latest update, the latest update that is not yet public. Stuff like that. And I started noticing very, very early on. I noticed, what happened?
Nothing. It goes on and off.
Okay. Noticing that some of these emails and some of these, a good copy, some of these emails were coming from the region of Gaza, Egypt, Israel. That region was especially active, and still is actually. This was last week, okay? So this is still going on. As soon as I put my latest tweet on Twitter last week saying Kamailio and so on, I started getting new Skype requests. So yeah, interesting stuff. But this is not all, of course. On freelancer.com, I managed to find this on Facebook, actually, which you could find back in 2013. There were a lot of posts asking for modifications of SibVicious so that it cannot be detected, whatever. And people were offering some money for such updates. I also got a lot of phone calls at one point in time from someone, I think from Egypt or somewhere like that. The phone quality of this phone call was really bad, so he must have been using, his own fruits. But he was asking for updates of SibVicious or some paid version at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., which was quite interesting for me. Eventually, I went back to sleep. But in 2010, RIPE published a blog post, which was particularly interesting. At first, it didn't look like it has anything to do with voice over IP or SIP. So they hooked up a 10 megabit port, very cheap of them, in my opinion, 10 megabit port to the internet and started publishing 1.1.1.0.24, and it was maxed out immediately. You can see in the graph, saturated switch. And the nice thing about this is that they published some statistics. It was mostly UDP, mostly towards a certain IP address, and mostly on UDP at least, to a certain port, 15206. And I highlighted the stuff that I liked. The only thing that I did not mention yet is that the data section starts with 80 hexadecimal. Now, if this works, now this reminded me of something I had seen in the past on my SIP honeypots. Because I kind of developed a small, very basic SIP honeypot back then. I don't run it anymore. Which I had noticed these invite messages towards that IP, towards that port, and you have to know that RTP starts with the 80 hexadecimal character. So, yep, that's definitely seems to be related to these scans, which I don't think were related to SibVicious actually, for just to mention that. But yeah, other people were doing scanning and sending invite messages. And the point is, the interesting part is that it seemed that there were a lot of SIP devices that were actually sending at 100 OK, just picking up and sending the RTP stream. So it would have been interesting if they had published the PCAPs. I would have loved to listen in to see which which rooms were being bugged, maybe. The year after, Sality, which is actually a a malware, a Trojan, or a botnet, actually had nothing to do with voice over IP, but at some point in time, whoever was managing this botnet started pushing Subvicious, or a modified version of Subvicious, but they pushed, the Python exe and so on, to all these infected machines. And Symantec posted some blog post about this, which was pretty interesting. I had noticed this in the past, a few months before, but what I noticed was the results of this. So we noticed, not just me, but friends of mine as well, we all noticed that there was some distributed SIP scanning going on, coming from various different IP addresses, which seemed to be coming from normal IP addresses, home IP addresses. So we published this, and then it resulted that this was in fact a botnet being used. Sometime later, in 2011, August, NSS Labs also spoke about the same sort of thing. And while checking it out, the Trojan that they mentioned, JQS.exe, is actually Sality. So the same guys were still doing it, even a year after. There must have been quite some money in this. And something else, in 2012, I noticed this video on YouTube. It still exists. It still is there, which I'm gonna show you. I speeded it up, sped it up. So you can see the resolution is quite bad, but this is results from someone running as VMAP on the internet and scanning for Tandbergs. And so once they found the Tandberg machines, they copy-paste right root, and the password, I think, was password for the default Tandberg. And they were just logging in, using FileZilla or whatever it is to upload Subvicious, and using Tandberg machines themselves to further their scanning. So this is a very old version of Subvicious, actually, that they were using. Yeah. Hack is money. So that's the name of this guy if you want to find him on Facebook and make new friends. Okay, reactions. I just put forward a few examples of how cybercrime, from my perspective, because I'm not the victim here, was benefiting. So one of the first things that from my part I did at one point, it was getting really bad, was to publish svcrash, which sounds very much like svcrack, so I might mistake them. The idea was that svcrash would crash svcrack and svwar by abusing a stupid flaw that I left in the code back then. I fixed this flaw, and I published svcrash as well. So this is what you would see if you were an attacker or testing this tool. So you've got a svwar for enumerating, or svcrack for cracking passwords, and it works normally. As soon as you run svcrash, it breaks because it's trying to parse a SIP message, and yeah. So that's a useful bug in a way, a feature. Of course, we had some discussions about this, but I published an FAQ where I spoke about why I think this is a good idea to publish this. It's not the solution to the problem, but it helps, and it really doesn't benefit these sort of attackers who are not trying to do denial of service to just flood their victims. So it's good for both the victims and the attackers to upgrade. Industry reaction, which is much more important in my opinion. Asterisk finally started enforcing always auth reject, which responds to SVWAR and similar tools in a similar manner, so that SVWAR cannot work like that. Of course, as our colleague here mentioned, people are using, and me too. I mean, I've done this in my penetration tests. People started using options and subscribe to do their enumeration. So I think Aster has kept fixing these things, but now it just doesn't work as far as I know. And I started seeing better passwords to a certain extent. And lots of people started using IPS solutions like fail to ban. So this did improve a bit the situation. At one point, I decided I wanted to rewrite the whole thing. So I issued a notice. And the reason was that I couldn't upgrade this to support TCP and TLS and IPv6, which I really wanted to support. But yeah, my failures, my attempts failed I tried various things. It's not so easy to rewrite something that got a lot of patches. In the meantime, during my penetration tests, I had been using a combination of these tools, so SIPVicious together with custom tools together with soft phones, like a lot of people do, and SIP whatever. And there were some tools which were published, like last year we had a presentation about Bluebox and G, and at least 2 other tools that really focused on voice over IP security / penetration testing. However, there's still a lot of SIP scanning going on. I think there were changes, as our colleague mentioned. But yeah, a lot of scanning is still going on. It's mostly friendly scanner, 90%, over 90%. There are some other. Yeah. Except that it's not a legitimate market, which I cannot tap into. So this year I had some voice over IP penetration tests, and I decided to use that as to do a rewrite. So I started noticing a lot of TLS now compared to the previous years. SIP enumeration is in a lot of times blocked, so you have to look at other ways to get to know which extensions are valid. Some agents check the headers, so check if the user agent, for example, Avaya, checks if the user agent has Avaya and they will block, obviously, your tools if they don't do things correctly from their point of view. And there were these sort of changes. Plus, I don't think these 3 tools cover all the attacks. So there's a lot of stuff that can be done. So I attempted yet another rewrite. This time, it covers TCP, TLS, IPv6. It's written in Go. I'm still learning Go, of course, like everyone else. But there is some working code. What else is new? Well, I rely on templates. So the SIP messages are no longer hard-coded, which means that you can, if you're a tester or a penetration tester, you can easily modify your SIP messages according to your needs. There is some RFC compliance this time. So invite messages are responded in a correct way. ACK messages are sent at the right time. By cancel is sent at the right time, and so on and so forth. And I implemented at least these 3 things, which I'm going to show. So the first thing that I'm going to show is how nice it is to just edit SIP messages, and it's using the templating library in Go, so it's pretty much supported. And you can put loops in there and go through different variables. So it's very handy. Of course, if you want to be cool, you have to put vicious in there, or friendly scanner. Next, I'm going to show a demo of SIP invite flood. This function, which is implemented in the new version. This functionality recently, I used it to bring down a phone system for telephone providers. So, it works in a controlled manner. I'm going to show this against my own asterisk server. It's not PJ-SIP, it's the old version of SIP, but it's the latest version of asterisk. So I'm showing that the netstat output shows just a few ports which are open. And then we go back to our tool as vtest, pass it the flood option, and there is another option which I'm not showing here, and starts sending a lot of invite messages. And immediately the asterisk server goes bonkers. Tries to open a lot of RTP sockets for some reason. I still have to look into this, and I think Matt will jump up as soon as he can. So you'll see that the netstat output will be full. And it will take a very long time for these. I don't think they close these ports. So yeah, it's a denial of service that really works. Now, I'm not saying that this affects all asterisk out there. Don't get me wrong. I tried it on asterisk now, and it didn't work. So, it's to be investigated. But it still works, invite flood. That's my point. And it works too well, in my opinion. And then there's this other feature that I have implemented, which is to reproduce the SIP digest leak. It's not a very complex attack, but this is where Kamailio comes in. So I set up a Kamailio server for testing purposes. I set up Xlite to connect to it. And so it's registering with the Kamailio. And then the tool is going to send an invite message to the SIP extension of the Xlite. And then the tool is going to, and then Xlite is going to hang up. So I'm going to click on the hang up button. And the tool is going to challenge the buy message, send a challenge request, a 401. And you're going to see what happens. I mean, you can guess. But you won't have to guess so much. So yeah, I'm showing that Xlite is connected. And then in the past, I used to think that this only works when you send an invite message directly to the SIP user agent, to the SIP soft phone. But it works through Kamailio, and I'm sure it works. No, it doesn't work through asterisk. So you can see there's a 401 unauthorized that is being sent twice because it's being sent to the Kamailio, and Kamailio is relaying it. So that's where the problem is, in my opinion. And then you have a buy message which responds with the challenge response. And I just did an offline brute force attack on that challenge response to get the original password. So it starts from 0 and goes up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a very few milliseconds. And yeah, you get the password. So that's a real problem that I think we should be discussing and finding solutions to. So what's next? Well, this is not public yet. The code is not public, and it's not an announcement. I really don't know if I should be publishing this. If so, under what license, and so on. But you too can help, of course. The first option is the best option, but the other options are also available. I'm not a very good sales guy, but yeah. If I make it available, of course, I'm sure that the code will be tested. Oh yeah, and since I made a new design, you can get some t-shirts. I don't have a lot, I just have 3 or 4, so please come get them. And once you get hit by the next version of the tool.
You need to do a contest
Yeah, sure.
on something. You have to ask
Yeah.
a question or something.
If I say how to solve that issue with the digest authentication, I will get one.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy with Kamailio to solve it.
That's
But,
actually a digest weak, which is known that
Yeah.
is known to be weak authentication. So the solution would be on Kamailio to turn on one-time nonce. So practically, you can't reuse the same nonce like reply attack. If I got it right, maybe I.
Not only that, I think it's better to just block the 401s if you can. But yeah, we can discuss that because it's
Yeah.
not easy. It's not easy to find a solution that works everywhere, of course.
Okay. Yeah, we can discuss it, but.
Sorry.
If you want to be secure and enforce authentication, you cannot do that.
You should do it when it's coming from the outside. So the attacker sending the invite is from the outside, okay?
Okay, but that's not a Kamailio issue. That's a general problem. How do you authenticate someone coming from some other domain?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to make the Kamailio reputation correct, that's if that's a flaw, then it's the interdomain SIP protocol design gap rather than.
Yes. I don't think it's a Kamailio issue.
Kamailio doesn't have any issue with the default config file, with the config file that we don't build for you. So it's up to you to make it secure. So
Exactly. I totally agree. So Asterisk blocks it because it's a different thing. So it makes total sense. Yeah.
okay, so questions, right?
Yeah. Question time.
Yeah, there, Matt.
If I help you with the file descriptor problem, can I get a T-shirt?
I think you can get a T-shirt anyway, but yeah, sure.
Awesome.
You had mentioned running a bunch of tests against Kamailio and Asterisk. Did you get any interesting results running it against FreeSwitch?
Not recently. I have used it against FreeSwitch in the past. Can't recall how it was.
But yeah, this guy can help you get a FreeSwitch installed eventually.
Good.
The first option on the list.
Your tool looks a lot like SIP-P in the end. What's the difference? Maybe that it's not conformed to SIP standard?
Yeah, so the new version, you mean, right? As V-test. I think my tools are more targeted towards penetration testers and security people who are not used to dealing with SIP-P and so on. So I think that's the difference. And implementing things like the digest leak, I know you can still do it through scripts. So yeah.
Yeah, but would be like using it to sniff also the traffic and reuse tokens from the receive replies to build something to target authentication, which you can do also with CP, but this one, it's making your life a bit easier, as I understood it, of course. It's just a preview. Yeah, more tailored, so you don't really need to be that aware of SIP protocol. With CP, you need to know how to do it, how to get the headers, like, for record route, you need to put these tokens there to reuse the record routing and so on. So that is probably as powerful as that you need proper SIP knowledge, and typically the attackers don't have the knowledge of technology that well. Other questions here, Sven?
You mentioned that your new tool knows some SIP, so it can do automatic acknowledge and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Is there also a way to turn this off so you can actually do non-expected stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I want a T-shirt.
Okay. Then Sandra will be around, and thanks again. I think it's one of those tools that wake up at night a couple of times past the year.
I'm sorry, very sorry.
If it wouldn't be you, it would be someone.
At least we know you got woken up too.
Yeah. So thank you, Sandro. Thank you, and we'll keep in touch.